Welcome to Fierce Female Filmmakers, a production of Artemisia's Daughters, a non-profit organisation that aims to inspire, educate, empower and employ women of all ages and backgrounds in the film and TV industry. Hello and welcome to Fierce Female Filmmakers. My guest today is the most amazing Elizabeth Yng-Wong. She's a filmmaker, but in many different manifestations, and I'm going to get her to tell us about that. Elizabeth, welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Just go through the list. Go through your list. Past, present, aspirational future. What are your skills and what do you do?
So I have ended up with a really eclectic resume that I have started to sum up as chemistry rather than credits, in that I have been in this incredible position where my credits have followed a path of people, sometimes quite out of the blue, calling me and saying, I either know you would be good at this, or I have a friend who told me to call you, and I'm curious if you're interested. And I'm someone who's always come to the table assuming that the more you know of the whole process and system, the better you are at any particular job, and especially in the producing and directing and the writing roles, because you have a sense of the whole at an experiential level. And so I have been able to produce features and television in documentary and narrative. I've done a ton of branded content as both a director and producer and editor. I have produced theater with some of our mutual friends, and I have written theater, a rock opera, or co-written the book for one. So I have been able to travel in many different mediums, in many different genres. And I most recently, actually, I was an assistant director on a motion capture set for NBA 2K, one of the very big sports video games. And I really essentially played more the role of like an on-set producer on that one. But I helped run a motion capture set on kind of an extraordinary schedule. And so I've been able to see.
It sounds like all of these skills, you have one skill and then there might be this area where you don't have the experience, but your brain and your talent is able to adjust and adapt. That's another thing that keeps coming up in these conversations, the ability to be adaptable and open to the challenge, like passion, adaptability, openness, collaboration. They all make up this multifaceted set of needs to be involved in this industry. It's not just one skill at all.
It's not just one skill, and it's really important in terms of establishing your abilities to be a productive collaborator. Of course, there are some people who really, they find their niche and they sort of stay there and are wonderful in that space. But I over time, there was a moment where I was judging myself for having so many different roles and thinking, Elizabeth, you just need to stop and stay in one and build those credits. But then they kept being in such interesting spaces and on such interesting projects that I started to understand it was on me to understand how all of it fit together in the context of storytelling. And that in the same way that I might be helping a director make an extraordinary schedule with really extraordinary actors on set in an unusual environment like a motion capture set, is connected to having a conversation with a director about an edit, which is connected to how I'm asking a question when I'm interviewing people, for a branded content documentary series. Like you just see how you're building story in every kind of role, but in a different part of the collaborative space.
Absolutely. And what I'm also getting from from all of that is what I'm noticing with younger women who are producing their own work. You know, when there's a void, the way to fill it, the mother of invention is to make your own stuff. So the mother of invention is I have to learn to write so I can direct something, you know, write this story that I have so I can direct it. And then, of course, I have to produce it because nobody cares about my story like I do. And as you do, you gather all these people around you to keep moving forward. But I think for the older generation in the film industry, not just women, you're right. You did one job. The only director I know coming up through the industry was Steven Soderbergh, who wrote, ran camera, cinematographer, directed, and then he was editor. And I remember a Q&A with him once after a screening of his films, and somebody said to him, who is keeping you on track? Who is your sounding board? Isn't it one of those jobs where you're always looking to bring in other creatives to collaborate with? And he said he does hire people to do that, but he just, like you said, he happened to have all those skills, and why wouldn't he use them? You know, but now so many more people are doing that, and women especially, because it's easier to just get on with it yourself.
It is easier to get on with it yourself, and it's quite empowering over time to have a sense of how all those different roles fit together. And I've also worked with a ton of just incredibly talented people, so I always treat everything that I'm doing as a learning space as well. We're constantly in this. We're constantly in a conversation with ourselves about, or I am at least, should I be directing because that's the role you're supposed to all be playing. But in fact, I keep thinking, it's so wonderful that I've had a chance to learn in a different role with really talented people in lots of, in the directing role or in the producing space, in the writing space, in the performance space, and the crew and the below the line, because you start to see how a team can really work together really well. And that's so much a part of carrying larger projects. Or making the crazy schedules on smaller projects. So I have at this point come to realize that having such an eclectic resume has been really to my advantage. I
want to work with you.
Well, thank
the price of one. There's a Catherine Tate sketch, isn't there? I don't know if you know the comedian Catherine Tate. She's like, I can do that. I can do that. That person is like, oh, I can do that. But you really can.
I really can, but it actually becomes I do try and make sure I understand who I'm talking to and what the scenario is, because not everyone wants to know that you can do that and that.
Well, I'm the same. I rewrite my resume or my CV every time I apply for any kind of job. You cut out all the stuff that isn't important, put in the stuff that is, the relevant stuff. They can find that out later, and hopefully by then it won't bother them that you did. I don't know. I don't know. So tell me, you didn't start off as a filmmaker or even in film. You were a teacher,
no.
Right? So tell me a little bit about that transition from being a teacher and inspiring young people, and then being inspired yourself and having that they call it the road to Damascus moment. That's what I think it was, anyway.
Okay. So yes, my first job was not in entertainment at all, but I was teaching high school social studies in Honolulu, which was a pretty great first job at a very wonderful private school there that had quite a lot of resources. And I loved being a teacher. I was connecting to a lot of the students in lots of different ways, especially though in the arts space, and I ended up helping to run the theater department there. And in that process,
and you're like, I can do that. I can run the theater department.
It was a little bit like that.
Yes, I've never done that, but I'll do.
And that there is some truth to that. I was just like, okay. And when you do that, you have to be willing also to look like a fool sometimes. So there are definitely been moments where I have made some huge mistakes, and people have and I've gone, and then you just keep going. But so I was lucky enough to be working with a bunch of the students who were interested in the arts, and my mother is an artist, so I have a particular awareness of the difficulty there can be in sharing that you want to follow an arts path. And so I know that I was doing that for a handful of students. And then but I started to notice in myself that I hadn't been taking care of that need for myself. And specifically at the time, it was actually more in the context of writing. And I'd grown up writing, and music was actually very much a part of my life. But I took it for granted, I've realized in retrospect. And then I had this moment, or this experience as a whole, where I was invited to participate in this international civics curriculum development program with a group of teachers out of Russia, but specifically Krasnoyarsk, Siberia. And they came to Hawaii, and we did a bunch of workshops together, and we worked together to create a civics curriculum. And I taught a experimental classroom about water rights. And the general idea is you're not teaching facts, you're teaching critical thinking. And you're teaching students at the high school level how to ask good questions. And so the final part of this particular phase of that was I got to fly to Krasnoyarsk, Siberia, over the summer.
Tell me what time of year. Please don't tell me it was 40 below and the propellers were freezing on the airplane. That's what, everyone just thinks Siberia freezing.
It was the opposite. Russia was in the middle of a terrible heat wave that it didn't actually know how to deal with because they are so used to cold weather. And my trip to Krasnoyarsk was its own epic experience. But when I got there, I was presenting to former Soviet teachers, now Russians, who were learning how to teach democracy, basically. And I had a translator who was about my age, actually, and she was still going through the training to become a teacher. And I had already started to think about the idea that maybe I needed to pursue filmmaking for myself because it was something that had been holding my interest. Literally nobody knew this because I was very quiet about those kinds of things at that point in my life. And, and there was this really unusual experience to hanging out with my translator because she wasn't allowed to eat with me because there wasn't enough food to go around. And so, so I would go off to eat meat at lunch, and then she would go do her thing. She told me about, everyone had their own garden off in the forest where they were literally growing potatoes. And then so we ended up taking her out to dinner at one point because another teacher and I, because we knew that it would be such a big deal for her. And we had this beautiful dinner. And I learned that she had seen Titanic 5 times. And I was so struck by the fact that this woman who could barely afford to eat, not because of her, she didn't have a job, but because of the way the economy was working at that point, had found a way to see Titanic, which was not available through a streamer that, like seeing a movie in a theater was a big deal. So I came away from that trip just so aware of the impact of films and Hollywood on the entire world, like literally to every corner. And that actually was reinforced the next year. I had applied to film school and gotten in. And before I went there, I went to USC in Los Angeles, and I went to China. And I was in the middle of nowhere in China with a Chinese friend who was basically functioning as my tour guide, and she kept putting us on these Chinese tours as opposed to American tours. So I kept being around a ton of people who only spoke Chinese, and so we're on a bus, and we were maybe in Xi'an, you know, where the terracotta soldiers are, somewhere over in that part of China, and someone sits down next to me because everyone's excited that I speak English. And literally the first thing they said to me, literally the first, was, "Life is like a box of chocolates." And I was like, someone is quoting Forrest Gump to me in the middle of nowhere in China. And that reinforced once again, you could be anywhere on the planet. And there were certain touchstone stories that were influencing everybody.
Yes, and what makes me think of is amazing, and how lucky are we to be in an industry with so much influence and power, but at the same time the responsibility to tell stories in the right way. And I think they're only now being told in the right way, because, you know, for so many years it's been white middle-aged men, American men, telling the historical stories. If you think of a history film, even James Cameron, bless his heart, told Titanic, you know, from his point of view. Let's imagine if his ex-wife, Catherine Bigelow, had taken the same subject, how she would have treated that story. Even though it is, you know, ultimately it's a woman, it's a heroine at the forefront, but he put a beautiful young woman at the forefront for a very different reason that you or I might do so, I think, now, especially 24 years later. But it is extraordinary, you know, or if you think about the first films you remember seeing, I remember Sound of Music, I remember Born Free, or, you know, at Sunday afternoons, they'd always show a classic American film on the television, and it would be summertime and blazing hot outside for, you know, 3 weeks of the year in England. But my mum would be like, "What are you doing watching TV? Get outside." But I was gripped by these old Hollywood musicals and westerns, you know, The Searchers, that moment when John Wayne walks out of the house and he's just brought Natalie Wood back, and they didn't even say thank you. I was like, they didn't even say thank you. And he's just spent the whole film dodging bullets and this, you know, and he brings her back to the family. They're like, "See ya." I was like, what? But, you know, that's just one example of how those films sort of, and they stay with you because you've seen them when you were so young.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the example of Titanic is just, it's just a weird phenomenon, that film. And I remember hearing Kate Winslet saying, similar to you, she was in the wilds of India. She said, "I had no makeup on. I was all like in this, I was sweating because we just climbed this hill. And there was this ancient, wizened little old man who went, 'You, Titanic.'" She was I was with my friend, and she thought the one place on the planet she could not get recognized. No, apparently there's nowhere.
There's nowhere. And it's, you know, I think it's funny for me in retrospect to realize too that my response to that was, I want to be a part of changing those stories. And part of that was because I did have a background as a teacher, and I did have students saying to me, "Oh, I'm actually learning more history from films than from class." And I was like, "You must be kidding me." Like, I mean, I know that you remember things more because you saw them in that film, but whether or not they're accurate means you're not asking the right question, right? Which means I may not be doing my job. But if
but no, it goes back to the power
Yes.
of that goes back to the power of movies. And now that you can just click on Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu and see anything at any time of the day that you want, it's even more intense. The voraciousness at which young people will consume that information, and if it's not told right, who's telling them that this is not the right way to tell a story, because it's still open to the interpretation of the writer and the director and the actors and all that melting pot of people.
What's so important now to see is that there is so much more diversity in the content that's available because of the streaming, and places like Netflix are commissioning original content from home countries. So a friend of mine just had a very successful release of an anime show out of the Philippines called Tress, or Tresse. I actually don't know, but it's wonderful, and I'm so glad to see that is what's happening, because that was my instinct that long ago when I went through film school, was that there needs to be this opening of narrative so that we can expand our understanding of the human experience. And it's so interesting to think about how what I was watching when I was young, a little girl, was affecting my understanding of both how I would look at myself and also what I thought was possible. And I'm someone who's, pretty ambitious about what I want to do. Like, I actually don't normally think I can't do something. But what I didn't understand is that there were certain things I wasn't thinking about doing because I had no visual on it being possible. And as someone who is Asian American, in that process, I had completely absorbed the idea that, I was a very unusual person in the room, and that more often than not, I would not be the person that someone was assuming would take on that role. Even though I felt like I was being an outspoken young woman, I was still playing into general expectations about the way society works. And that's a remarkable thing to see in retrospect.
In retrospect, yes.
Yeah.
But if you look back and if that's the way the world is, it's not the burden on the young person to sort of peek out from behind the curtain and say, I can do that too. Why is my heritage or the way I look not like how I see people in TV and films? And that is changing. It is. But I think it's far more important to give people of different backgrounds, give them the microphone, give them the camera, rather than doing it in reverse and sort of shoehorning them into what is still a white person's story because they're still running the world. Is like, no, here's the camera, here's the microphone, here's a I was going to say typewriter, here's the computer. You can have a typewriter, love, but here's the skills, because everybody grows up. When I talk to young people, they still are saying to me, but how can I make a film? And I'm like, you've got a phone in your hand.
Yes,
experience. You have a mum, you have a grandma, they all have stories. Your dad has stories. Make a short film. All your friends have a story. All of you have a story together. I was so inspired by Sarah Gavron's latest film, Rocks. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see that, but it was up for a number of awards at the BAFTAs this year. And she took 2 years with these young girls in this one particular community and said, right, tell me your stories. Let's explore your stories. And it's all about them, and they're all in it. And then one of the most inspiring things to me was one of the actresses who played she was the friend. She says, now when I leave school, I want to be an actress and a director, because she was directed by a woman who, in that melting pot, and not to mention it became this extraordinary film because it had the backing and it had a director, a female director with some experience. She knew what she was doing. But there you are. There's a 16-year-old who's already decided that she can do more than one thing.
Yes. And it's someone who has done that. It's wonderful to see. And I also think it's really important to support women who are already in the middle of their career, who are not growing up with you and me and our friends, who are pushing open these doors and windows and every little nook and cranny for them to find their way in. I really feel so committed to making sure we don't forget that women over 35, women over 40, I mean, the ages arbitrary, but are actually, they have so much to say. And
tell me a little bit about, because I fall into this category, that idea of when you're in the middle of your life, or even 35, which is so young to me now. There are women who are who have not broken into the film industry a lot of times for the reasons you're talking about, or they've had children and their children are now off and flown, and they feel this sort of rudderless path ahead of them, but still, unlike our parents' generation who are like, right, I'm retiring now and I've got my pension and feet up and gardening. The opposite is true. We feel like I'm free and I'm fit and I'm young enough to start something all over again. And talk a little bit about that, how there's a level of ageism, more ageism with women than men, possibly.
Absolutely. And not just in terms of their looks on camera and, with actors. It's, there's something I think that's really important to continue to address as we, send funding towards new filmmakers, towards filmmakers just coming out of college, towards filmmakers in high school. In the same way that someone says, I can't make a film, and you say, well, you have a phone. I want to say that to a 50-year-old woman. You have a phone now. And in fact, one of my very dear friends who has a very active career as an actress and writer, DeHaley Hall, is a comedian, and she's been on Dear White People. She's been in Dear White People. She and I are finishing a project this summer that we shot when she got married a couple years ago now, that we're treating as her wedding video. And we shot it so lo-fi. It's, it's so lo-fi. It's on phones, it's on old video recorders, whatever we had around at that moment in time with our crazy schedules. She had just gotten married and she did a stand-up show about her wedding. And and our interest in doing it is like, let's just make it happen, and it doesn't have to look amazing to continue your career of storytelling. And it's something we're doing on the side, and lots of people have seen parts of it and been like, you guys, that is so lo-fi. But that's kind of not the point. The point is we made something. And I was talking to a young woman who was coming out of film school or art school maybe a few years ago now. And she was unclear as to whether or not she should try to make things, even if they weren't going to be big projects. And I was like, this is backwards. Like, you have everything you need now to make something and to practice your expression of your voice and to cultivate your voice. And I know I'm still doing that, like it doesn't stop.
I think there's a huge cultural thing amongst women of our generation, less so with young women, although I have spoken to young women on this podcast who have felt when they're alongside the boys, there's all this confidence that's in their DNA, that they just have a go. Their fear of failure is minimal. They're not afraid of making a fool of themselves. Whereas women, that first day I went on to the first film set, all I said to myself was, please just don't make a fool of yourself. Don't let them know that you haven't directed traffic before. Just if you can get through the day, one day, if you can get through the day without me. Now, I think it's different for boys. And certainly what I'm hearing is that. And you're kind of underscoring that. That young woman was afraid of failing. And the thing about film versus theater, for instance, like in theater, you have to say it all at once and you get one go, it comes out your mouth. You can't go, cut, do it again. In film, this is what I love about film, why I got fed up with theater, because not only did you get to opening night, you've done it, you've remembered your lines. Wait a minute, I've got to do it for 6 more weeks or 3 more months. I didn't, what? So, so film is the perfect solution for me. And now I don't even have to be the actor, I can be the director. But anyway, a rambly way of saying, even when it's shit, even when it's a bit rubbish, you can find a way, put it into the hands of a skilled, experienced editor like your good self. You haven't even spoken about your editing. Give it to another storyteller who has another skill in this process that can chop and change and maybe move some scenes around, put some music under it, find some sound design. There are so many ways to make the tapestry of your film come together. It's not just, oh, I messed up my line. Oh, I kind of shot that wrong. Well, dump that take or dump that scene. Maybe go back and shoot another. It's a world full of reshoots. Although I've never had the luxury of reshoots. But as long as nobody died, have another go.
Have another go. It's really important, and what you can accomplish in post-production is very powerful. And again, you can't get better unless you keep doing it. And I think this is something I see it in my friends of all ages. The fear of failure, I think part of it is natural human personality traits, but I think also there is this false narrative that unless you can do something in one go, like Charles Dickens sits down and writes A Christmas Carol, and that's the only way you know that you're good at something, is completely false. And it gets in the way of so many people I know actually finishing their first of anything. And it pains me because I see it happening in these really brilliant friends of mine. And the one thing I know that I worked on so much and have overcome is, like, who the fuck cares about the first draft? Like, just get it out. It doesn't need to be in the right form. It doesn't need to look like it's supposed to look. You don't need to look the way you're supposed to look. Like, it just needs to get expressed so that then you can look at it and look at it again and look at it again. And so that feels like something very important to me to say out loud, because I actually see it happening in real life with real people who have so much to say, and their understanding of what it means to be a successful storyteller is that you just do it, and there it is, and it's wonderful, and
I worked with a writer once. I did a one-woman show, and she was of the mindset that her work was perfect, that we were like, no, this was way early. I was still acting. I had no thoughts about being a producer or a director. And I realize now she taught me a very valuable lesson, is that nothing comes out perfectly formed, fully formed. In fact, part of the beauty of it is the what bit shall we cut? How can we tell this story so succinctly that we don't need any? And again, with film, you can show, don't tell, show, don't tell. There's so much in a film, the image, the actor's performance without saying anything, the sound, the music, the no sound, the no music, all of that, those choices that you make that take the audience on a journey with you. And actually the scary thing that I found in post-production, that there was so many options, then the pressure was on me to make the right choice, Yeah. But luckily I had a skilled editor alongside me, and I had a producer with me who knows about story. Yeah. And it became this process, this another whole rewrite, as everyone knows. And you write the script many times, you perform it, you do many takes, you choose, and then you do a third pass at the story. We moved scenes around in my film that I never thought would. No. I wrote them in that order because otherwise the timeline, it's not going to make sense. But actually, one of the producers pointed out that the timeline didn't make sense once we watched it in the assembly. Like a lovely piece of elastic that moves and contracts and expands and just becomes greater than the sum of its parts once you start dropping in all of those skills. It's It's a really exciting. Listen, ladies, whoever's listening right now, it sounds complicated, but it's really exciting when it's working in your favor.
There's something actually magical, even on the smaller projects that I've worked on, when you start to see the edit arrive at itself. It's amazing. It really is. And it's
talk a bit about that process. Talk a little bit, because I've seen Martin Scorsese on his masterclass trailer going, if you're not ready to throw up after you see the first assembly of your film, you're not doing it right.
Yeah,
like that's completely correct. When you see it all together, you're like, no. But you're saying that it takes time to get to this magical place you're talking about.
It does take time, and it takes quite a lot of safe space and humility. You want to, ideally, you are surrounded as you go into post-production as a director with people who can speak honestly to you without making you feel like the world is going to end because you made a mistake on day 12 of your shoot, and then having people who understand and can help you figure out the timing about when to share the cut. And this is something I've had to learn the hard way on every kind of project is, I know personally, I can get so excited about something I've just bundled together really quickly as an assembly because I already know my skill set is to be able to see basically the finished product. And I have forgotten so many times that most people don't have that skill set developed, not because they're, bad people, but because they don't do that work. And it can really get in the way. You want to make sure you're not getting a no or a negative comment before you're ready to hear one. And that's a really important thing to check in with yourself about, because it can send you off in a direction that you don't actually need to go in. You just need to step away for a second and take in all the notes and then understand, again, revisit what your priorities are with the story. And, I've worked as an editor now in many different scenarios, both in narrative film and in documentary and in short branded content, and in, and working on my own personal projects. And for me personally, I love it because I love puzzles, and editing is like the most amazing 4-dimensional puzzle of sound and color and timing and rhythm. And I think there's something about being able and willing to make mistakes as you find that final version of the story for that particular way the project's going to finish. Like everyone knows there's like 1,000 different ways, 1,000 different directions you can go in, as you were saying, when you step into that edit in the first week, especially. But in fact, what my experience has been is that the more you have the conversations about what the priorities are and the more you shape it, then the decisions start to reveal themselves pretty organically, because one decision means this decision. And once you've arrived at that one, then, as you're saying, actually that scene, for whatever reason, works 3 scenes earlier, which I never would have guessed without just truly taking it out of the timeline and dumping it in earlier. And that's the beauty of the edit, which I think a lot of people also don't take advantage of, is you get to experiment now in the digital editing process like you never could when it was, working in a truly non-digital realm. And so why not at least try it for one day and see if maybe there was something that you didn't think of before that no one was thinking of. And then actually much more clearly why you're making a decision. So it's editing, as you've heard me talk about it in other realms, but it's a truly underappreciated part of the filmmaking process, and it is a powerful, powerful tool.
Yes, yeah. It really is. And I admire all those people who don't mind sitting in a dark room for days on end.
Well, you know what's so interesting
Again,
about it?
with my project, not necessarily their own project.
Yeah.
There's an element in the personality of the editor who sort of takes the baby from the mother and takes it out of the cradle and dresses it in an ugly baby grow or a beautiful one. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a really silly metaphor, but the idea that you're taking something that's very precious to one creative person and entrusting it with another creative person, and like you said, it's various assemblies and machinations before you boil it down to getting, much closer to what it'll be at the end of the process is it can be painful. It can be painful for the person who by their very nature, the director by their very nature has to have a very clear vision. So you're kind of smashing up that vision a little bit and putting it back together. And the personality of the editor has to be very very understanding, I think. And it sounds like you've gone through that, and you now understand that process. I get a lot of and again, this could be my inexperience, and I didn't go to film school, so I don't know right? So I will be like, well, I want it to be like this or look like that or sound like that, and I'll get, well, you don't do it like that, and that's not how you do it. I was like, oh, why? Do you have a book that tells me, is there a book written? Why? But then what happens to me is then I start second guessing my choice and my desire to have that moment. There is a moment in my film where I wanted complete silence. Oh no, you can't have complete silence because it freaks the audience out. They think there's something wrong with the tape. What they're saying is they'll think the sound mixer messed up and there's 2 seconds of silence. Or apparently there is one film in the history of film that did it, and it's a historical moment. I said, okay, that's great, but I just want there to be I want people to freak out a little bit. And we put in like the barest perceptible amount of ambience in there, as low as we can make it, so that Alexandra felt she had no sound for 3 seconds or something.
It's such it pains me to hear that. Yeah, no, it actually pains me to hear that, because what I do know is that it is a very fine line when you want to try something that isn't often done. You have to make sure you've set it up so that it doesn't read as a mistake. And people, because everyone is so protective of their work, then people start protecting their work and saying, no, you can't do that. And really the answer is, how do we do that so it doesn't sound like a mistake? And what else do we need to change potentially in other parts of the film to set people up so they know it's not a mistake? And the thing I've actually, and I don't want to say this because I know some of the people in your film, so I'm very hesitant to critique this moment. But to me, the really special, important part of editing, and it's a specific part of my personality because I am just as comfortable directing, but I find it so meaningful to me to sit inside someone else's creative vision. And again, it's a learning space for me. And I think about, well, why do they want to make that decision as opposed to this decision? And there have been moments where I have been vocal about, like, I'm not sure this is the right thing to do, but then I have to circle back to myself and think, well, what I'm doing right now is serving someone else's vision, and I need to see, maybe this is something I didn't understand before. But a lot of people sit in that's not the way it's done, especially when the director is someone who's brand new. And right now, a lot of women are brand new directors just because of statistics, right? And so I have witnessed on more than one occasion, and now have another big version of it, of people, men and women, who have a lot more experience telling someone that's not the way it's done. And I just find it like a breakdown of the creative process, because it might be true that in the end you can't do it and achieve actually what you wanted from that silence, but the responsibility of the editor, of your collaborators, is to have the conversation about, this is why we think it won't work, but how can we try and make it work?
Exactly. But that's not the first part of the conversation. We got there. We had to get there. But the first knee-jerk response is, no, that's not how I was trained. That's not how the history of film has done it.
Well, then let's make history. That's also my personality. Like, well, then why shouldn't we be the first?
I mean, yeah, that was my tendency, but at the same time, I didn't, it's
hard.
a really fascinating process, because you're taking on all sorts of personalities and skills alongside and totally mixed in with a film. Another thing that struck me about my process with my film was my friends who had invested in the film, and not one of them had invested in film before. But it was very interesting for them to follow the process and each point and each turn and each little milestone. And of course, it took a great deal of time, because we were constantly trying to raise a bit more money to pay the composer, to do the final, mix and all of that stuff. And all of them were like, my goodness, we had no idea how many man and woman hours go into, forget the money, just the time and the skill involved in just 1 minute of high-end television or a movie. It's like, you don't know the half of it. And this is a tiny movie we're talking about. And just, every time they'd see me, like, how's it going? I was like, about the same as it was about 2 weeks ago when you asked me.
I know. It's really true. There's so much that goes into it. And especially if you're working with a larger group of people, it's a lot of little tiny details and decisions.
So what are we going to do about it, Elizabeth? How are we going to change the world?
Well, what I keep coming back to for myself is my work is my representation of doing that. Like, I can't help, as a woman of color, literally everything I do is participating in changing that, because you talk about the history of film, there just isn't a lot represented there. I mean, there is now in the last few years, especially, but it's like, my work is important, as is your work. Like, we are a part of the shifting of the historical narrative around film. I mean, and I'm saying that as a former history teacher, who but it's true. It's not, I'm not making that up. Like, you making a film, me making a film, me working as an editor, me basically doing anything that I've done has put me in a position where I'm one of only a handful who are doing it. And I don't think I even understood how much that was true, especially, when I got started. Like, I was just doing it. And I think the important thing right now is to keep making things. So take the camera, take whatever you have available, use whoever's around, and practice and fail and learn. And sometimes the mistakes are the inspiration point. Like, that's the other thing, is we get so worried about making mistakes that we overlook these moments, which is why things shift. It's like, you don't do it the way you're supposed to do it, and then this really cool thing shows up. And so I need to keep working. That's the way. And I need to keep making things, and some of them are going to be good and some of them aren't. And I'm going to, I've made a fool of myself so many times. And I'm really learning to love that is the process. And
yes. I also think what we're talking about too is independent film, and on the low budget end, which of course is lovely to see that Hollywood has to sit there at the Oscars and the BAFTAs and watch all these tiny films
I know.
directed by women getting all this attention. Now, there's an argument that last year that happened because they've held back a lot of the big male directed films. Fair enough. It gave us a platform to say, look, when you boys are all sitting on your movies because you want to wait for the audience and the numbers and the box office, we're never worried about that. We don't even have that in our. We just like to pay our investors back or get a really nice film festival tour.
Yes,
or
yes.
I mean, that's the difference. Yeah, I heard Charlie Brooker, who created and wrote almost every single episode of Black Mirror, which I've watched twice through. Right, amazing. He said, "Look, I'm kind of now getting towards the end of my career, and I was given this opportunity. In the middle there, I was doing all of everybody else's stuff, or I was for hire, or I was at the beginning when you have no money and no stakes. You just do what you do. You can make all the mistakes and you actually do exactly what you want. Middle of your career, blah, blah, blah. You're making a living wage. You've got kids, mortgage, you do that. And then at the very end, they go, Charlie, what would you like to do? Well, I've got this idea about, our phones are like a black mirror. And if you take that to the next level and the next level, I'd like to do, okay, why don't you do that then? About 15 times over. But he had to wait till till his later life to go back to having the freedom to fail, essentially. And I think you mentioned it a bit earlier. The streamers they need so much content that they're okay with putting a couple of seasons of something out there that doesn't really catch. But the thing is that there's such an exposure to so much audience that when it does, everybody wins, because just the click of a button and you can watch it at your own pace.
Everybody wins, and it's amazing to see. And sometimes it's frustrating because it's taken a while for there to be an awareness that there's an international world, that there's a world within the United States that has, that's more than your basic suburban community. There's, and yet it's happening. And so I'm really interested to see how it keeps developing. And I am understanding it's not all happening overnight. And, and so that is, I got into this a long time ago because I understood I wanted to be a part of that shift. And and it's a commitment, and it's really hard a lot of the time. And you are, having worked on the big video game now, there are differences between what your role is in a well-funded creative endeavor than an independent film. And you have to respect what happens when that much money starts to be a part of the conversation. Everyone's caught in that same space. They're all beholden to extreme budgets now. There's not a lot of in-between space at the moment. And that's not because, the executive who's overseeing that particular project that has that $100 million budget isn't creative. It's that they have a job that requires them to be responsible to quite a large amount of money. And so the other thing that I've been practicing for myself is really understanding where I want my idea to fit, because we identify our success in general, or other people do, certainly, by whether or not they've seen it and whether it's been on the biggest, platform. And I don't know that every idea I have belongs on the biggest platform. And I don't know that I actually want to be in that conversation all the time, so I've really been checking in with myself about what the different ways your work can be successful, and also on the daily part of living a creative life, really understanding the importance of process and cultivating a world around you of inspiring people. I mean, that is one of, I think, my biggest successes, is that I keep getting to work with incredibly talented people. And I get to talk to you, and we have this wonderful, fun conversation about something that's actually really hard to do. And so my daily life is about interacting with just people I have so much respect for. And that's,
it feels like it ends up feeling like family to me.
Yes.
Like I wish I'd been born into this family or that family. But actually, I've kind of made one big swirling amorphous family out of the people that you get. So it's again going back to the small tiny projects where time is your arch enemy and lack of money is keeps you in this mental place of poverty. So time, money, all lack of it, and everybody has to gird their loins and get to it. And you get on the train, it's rolling into the station, and it doesn't matter how fast it's going, you just get on with it and you make it work. And those are those days, aren't they? Or those moments, or when you wrap and you're drinking your little plastic cup of champagne or prosecco that somebody's run to the 7-Eleven for. Like, oh, we're almost at wrap. We better have some kind of celebration. I have all those photographs of me holding the clapper and my hair and my face just, like I've been through a war, because I have. I'm holding my little plastic cup of prosecco. We did it. We did it.
You did. Yeah. And it's amazing when you do, and that's it. It's a really special process and experience.
Yes. Well, you have inspired me. I'm hoping that anybody listening to this chat is inspired too. I can't imagine that they wouldn't be, that you can be from any background. You can grow up not seeing yourself on TV or in film and change that within your own lifetime. And it's kind of everything to play for. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm going to put all the details of your work and films, like Never Here, we have to put in there, all that, so people can check out your work, and then anything else that's coming up. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me to the table, so to speak.
Well, I'm going to have you back, so you better get.
I'm ready. I'm ready, and I'm going to answer one last question, because it's actually important to me to say it out loud. When we started this, you asked me aspirationally, and in the context that now that I'm embracing like doing everything. It's like I haven't been on camera very much. I actually have in documentaries, but I really want to be in a really ridiculous comedy. So I'm saying that out loud. I want to play on camera. So there we go. The end.
Say it. Yes. If you don't say it, how are you going to know? How is anybody else going to know? Can't keep it a secret. I love that. Oh, I'm going to have to write you a part now.
Okay. So thank you so much. And I look forward to talking again.
We'll have you back.
Okay.
A wonderful extension to this story and conversation is that since Elizabeth and I met on this podcast, we have been working together on a feature documentary about Titanic, which is due to be released in early 2023. Look out for it. It's called Ship of Dreams. Fierce Female Filmmakers is a production of Artemisia's Daughters. For more information, go to artemisiasdaughters.org. Our theme tune is composed by Charlie Mackey.